Kerry. She knows all the technical biz. Hi to everyone who's joining us, New South Wales ACT. My name is Carolyn Sheehan. Hold on. And I'm just trying to, I've got a problem with it. Okay, sorry, Kerry, it's just not letting me do my slides. Hold on. I'm not sure what's going on. We always have technical glitches. Look, my name's Carolyn and I work for the HIA as the manager for the programs we do with the New South Wales Apprenticeship Compact, and lots of experience on the ground, vocational education and training, apprenticeships and traineeships. So everything that I'm talking about to you guys in this series is all based on the ground practical stuff. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Scott Lawler from Serena Russo Apprenticeships. He is the operations field manager for New South Wales and ACT. Scott has got even more experience than I have across all of vocational education and training, apprenticeships, traineeships, and between the two of us, we've probably heard everything and seen everything, I would think. Okay, so what we're going to do in this webinar is, in the second webinar, is talk about, and Scott's going to do a lot of the talking on this one, what are the, who are the apprenticeship support networks? What do they actually do? What's their role? Who is Serena Russo Apprenticeships? And how do they interact with group training organisations, whether they are part of the HIA or external group training organisations. Also, so Scott's going to go through all of the up-to-date incentives, the trade support loans, the training contract information, all of that. And then at the end, the last little 15 minutes, we're going to talk about, since it's December, talk about making sure that what's your duty of care as an employer at Christmas with your Christmas parties and all of those kind of things. And as Kerry said, if you'd like to type in your questions, we can answer all of those either during the webinar, or we will follow up with you afterwards if that's your preference. So I will hand over to Scott Lawler from Serena Russo. If you'd like to just introduce yourself, Scott, and jump right in.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Thank you very much for that. Once again, everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. Carol, can you just go back to that first slide, if that's okay? Thanks so much. That'll be great. That one there be first. Yep. Fantastic. Just a bit of a brief background of myself. As Carol mentioned, I've been in the apprenticeship game now for about 21 years in the apprenticeship network providers space. Prior to that, I was a apprentice manager for a company called Email. So I've had a fair bit of experience in the apprentice arena. Now today, I really want to just cover a few pods that obviously that Carolyn's got on the screen there, and I'll go through each of those points and just give you a bit of an overview about that. And like I said, we will go into the incentives that are available now for employers, and also talk about some of the incentives that are available for the apprentices. But also too, I just want to also bring some of the employees up to date about some of the new changes that will be in the new contract that the federal government's just announced, which will be commencing the 1st of February as well. So I'll be overviewing those as well. Just first up, the appointed providers currently in New South Wales. Now, the federal government put out to tender some time ago for organisations to continue providing apprenticeship support to the industry, which has been announced just about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And that new contract will be commencing as of the 1st of February 2020. In New South Wales, there'll be 4 providers that have been successful in that contract. The first one being ASA, which is Apprenticeship Support Australia. The other one is being MEGT, ourselves being Serena Russo, and another company by the name of Virto. Now, those 4 companies will be providing apprenticeship support services to employers and apprentices as of the 1st of February 2020. A bit of an overview about what Serena Russo does. Serena Russo has been working in the apprenticeship arena for the past 16 years, providing support in the AMP, or we used to call them ACTs, has been operating now for the past 16 years. We hold contracts in Victoria, ACT, New South Wales, and going to be, as of the 1st of February, we'll be also holding those contracts in Queensland as well. What our role is. Now, our role is basically the federal government have given us a proposal. What our role is to market and promote vocational training to industry and to job seekers, students, and so forth. And we're trying to motivate or educate people about vocational pathways. The main aim of our scope is to give an overview about how apprenticeships or traineeships work, the traditional trade apprenticeships such as our plumbers, carpenters, and so forth, but also try to educate people about what other pathways are available for people undertaking vocational training through the traineeship and apprenticeship pathway. Our contract covers three main functions. Our first one is being what we class as the gateway services, where we actually go out to schools and we market, promote that apprenticeship and traineeship arena to school students. We go into schools very regularly, actively talking to the students. We go to career expos and we talk about how the concept of that, the apprenticeships and traineeship work through the whole arena in regards to making sure that they understand, so they're hopefully a bit more job ready when they start looking for apprenticeships and have more of an idea. The second part of our calling is really to work on what we call universal services. And this is the part that the employers such as yourselves may be more familiar with, is where our organisation will make appointments with employers to come out and actually help complete the training contract. Okay, so once we have a person actually that's taken on board with that employer, our organisation will traditionally make an appointment with both the employer and the apprentice, and we normally come out to the workplace and actually complete the relevant documentation needed to register that apprentice or trainee with the relevant state training authority. In New South Wales, that is New South Wales State Training Services, and if you're in the ACT, it's Skills Canberra. And our organisation will be responsible for providing all that paperwork, so pre-prepping all the paperwork, but coming out and actually talking to the employer and the apprentice and make sure they have a full understanding of exactly what they're getting themselves into in regards to the documentation, their obligations, and also to informing the employer and the apprentice about what type of incentives or other services that may be able to be offered to them during the course of their apprenticeship. Our third part that our contract holds is a mentoring service. Now, a lot of people aren't aware of this mentoring service, but our organisation, in Serena Rosso, once you actually do take that apprentice on, we offer to apprentices, where the employer is willing, and both the apprentice and the apprentice, we offer them a mentoring service. So once the person is actually employed, our organisation will set up a mentoring program where that person can, both employer or the apprentice, can actually seek advice or support from our mentors to help get that person or that trainee or the apprentice through their apprenticeship. It is a free service. The apprentice can opt in and opt out at any stage. Okay, so something might happen in the second year of their apprenticeship or something like that. That apprentice can actually then jump on board and actually move, and we can actually provide some additional support. Now, once again, it's a voluntary service. They don't have to undertake it, but it is a service that we provide there. And once again, we're just trying to obviously increase our completions and actually provide that a support structure to that apprentice or trainee during the course of their training. So there are three main services that we're currently providing. Is our gateway services, our universal student services, where we do the sign-up process, and then moving forward on to the mentoring side.
And just for those listening in, just to let you know that HIA Apprentices, our GTO arm, use Serena Russo is our apprenticeship centre in partnership, and all of our in-house apprentices all get signed up and through Serena Russo across the states. Sorry, just wanted to put that in for you there, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for disclosing that. Thanks, Phil. Okay, how do we actually interact with group training organisations? Now, if you're not familiar about how a group training organisation works, they're an organisation that will actually recruit, source, and actually employ the apprentice, and then host it into an employer as sort of like under a labour hire structure, but where the person actually is placed into that host employer. And that way, that employer doesn't have to look after things such as workers' compensation, workers' comp, and I'm sure that Carolyn might be able to go into that a little bit further. Our organisation, Serena Rosso, does exactly the same thing. We provide exactly the same service to group training organisations as we would to a direct employer of an apprentice. We are there once again as an information service to that organisation, and we also look after providing in regards to all the sign-up processes and lodging all the documentation with, once again, with that relevant state authority for approval for that apprenticeship. Okay. You just go to the next page over, please, thank you, Karen.
There you go.
Okay. The federal government have set up and structure a national code of good practices for both employers and apprentices that undertake an Australian apprenticeship. And that document there is that document that the employer, so the federal government have actually developed. Now that document is very much similar to the obligations that actually stated on the training contract. Okay, so I do actually just have to point it out as part of our obligation with the federal government. We do need to let both employer and apprentice know about this particular document. It is normally also emailed out to the apprentice and the employer post the sign up, so they actually do have a copy of it, but it's just outlining the obligations of an employer and apprentice when they actually undertake the apprenticeship, when they fill in the training contract. And I will go through some of the obligations of the training contract very shortly. The employer's obligation illegally is they've got to provide a safe work environment. So they've got to make sure that the apprentice is actually in a safe position or a safe mode. They've also got to support structured training. So anytime the apprentice has to attend their training provider, such as TAFE or their relevant private training provider, that the employer obviously supports that structured training. And they've got to provide supervision and support in the workplace. So they've got to have some sort of direct supervision to that apprentice to make sure that they are being taught the trade and they're actually improving on that skill. The apprentice's obligation really is to, once again, make sure they attend work and perform the work under the employer's instructions. And they're going to take care of workplace property and resources. They're going to respect the rights of other employees in the workplace. And also they must keep all the information that they actually obtain from their employer as confidential. Now, so we have to put that in there because a lot of apprentices use documentation from some of their training that they use with employers, and they use that sometimes as work evidence for their RTO. So they're just going to make sure that they actually aren't passing on private and confidential information and so forth. So that National Code of Practices is in place. It's a document that really should be passed on to you when you actually take on an apprentice or a trainee. And once again, it's normally sent to you and from our organisation in an email format, so you actually have that documentation. So we're not handing out endless amounts of paperwork. Just go to the next page if you could, thanks. Okay. Now, for some of you that obviously have taken an apprentice on before, or if you have not, when we talk about that universal services before, that is where an apprenticeship provider, such as ourselves, when you actually are taking your apprentice on or your trainee on, we need to come out and complete a national training contract. Now, it is a federal document. It is national. The same contract we fill in New South Wales is the same we do in ACT and the same we do in Queensland and so forth. But each training contract is lodged with the local relevant training statutory body, whether, once again, if New South Wales is skills is State Training Authority. If that is in ACT, it's Skills Canberra. It's a legal binding document between both the employer and the apprentice for the duration of the term of the apprenticeship or traineeship. So the binding document is only in place for that term of the length of training necessary to gain that qualification. So if the apprentice is there for 4 years, that binding document is in place for that 4 years of the apprenticeship. If it's a traineeship and only goes for 2 years, once again, that documentation is there in binding for that particular term. If the apprentice early completes the traineeship or the apprenticeship, the term of the training contract actually ceases as of the completion or the early completion date that has been requested to the State Training Authority. Reason why I mention that is because the obligation to both the employer and the apprentice to that apprenticeship is only binding for the term of the traineeship. Once again, I mentioned earlier, the completion of all documentation, all training contract is completed by your apprenticeship provider. In this case, organisation Serena Rosso. Once again, would make the appointment with yourself and for the apprentice, and would come out to site and see you at the appropriate level. Sometimes we can see the employer, we sometimes see the employer and the apprentice at separate occasions, but we do need to physically meet both apprentice and employer to get the documentation completed. In some instances for remote locations, so if a person is rural and regional and the sign-up is urgent, we can actually do a phone sign-up, but we do need to follow up with a site visit to make sure that both parties understand their obligations and that we've actually visited the work site and so forth. Once all the documentation's completed, can you just go back, sorry, Karen?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Once the documentation's all completed, we have to lodge it with that state training authority, as we mentioned earlier. Now we have to, when we actually are completing the documentation, the training contract, we have to work in the guidelines of the approving state. Okay, so it goes to the state training authority and they formally approve and register the apprentice with that employer. We're not the approving or the authority. We are completing the documentation and helping support that completion, and we then have to lodge it to the relevant state authority, and they do the approval. As long as it all fits through and we've got the right vacation, the terms correct, the employer has been assessed as being adequate to provide the training, the state training authority will actually approve, and they will send out a formal notification to both the employer and the apprentice by post. They do not email that documentation. It is sent out to the employer, the apprentice, via post, and that's a formal approval. It will have the start date, the completion date, and what qualification they're undertaking, and which RTO they are using. It will also have the commencement date of the apprenticeship. I won't go into that too much. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, and the document can only be changed by mutual agreements by both parties. So if the document needs to be shortened because they're early completing, or we need to extend the document because the apprentice needs additional time, both parties need to agree to that. So any changes we need to make to that document, both parties need to be of approval to do that. The apprenticeship is deemed successful on completion of the agreement between both the RTO, the TAFE, and the state relevant authority. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the term of the apprenticeship for most apprenticeships, traditional trade, is 4 years. Okay, but at the approval of completion of the formal training component and the employer, they can both be deemed competent. So the apprentice can actually shorten the apprenticeship on early completion request if all three parties abide or agree to that term. Okay, so traditionally it used to be 4 years, but we can actually ask for early completion, but the apprentice has to be deemed competent in the workplace by both the training provider, and it should be done by the employer, and then as issued to the state government for approval. They will only approve an early completion on the recommendation of those parties. Next page, thanks, Carol.
And I just want to point out that for if anyone's taking on an apprentice that's under 18 years of age, then a parent or legal guardian has to be in part of that training contract process as well.
Absolutely, yeah, I was going to. That's fantastic. Well, if we are under the age of 18, we really do prefer to have the parent present at the time of signing. It is not always possible. We understand that, but we want to be in communication with the parent. If the apprentice or trainee is under the age of 18, we really need some contact and communication with them when we're signing off. Once the apprentice turns over the age of 18 during the term of the contract, our contact can only be then with the apprentice or trainee. We cannot communicate with the apprentice's parent once that apprentice turns the age of 18. Okay, thanks for letting that up. Besides the term of the contract, I won't go into that too much, but training as per the agreed training plan. Okay, at the time of signing the apprentice up in New South Wales, our organisation, once we're doing the documentation of the training contract, we also must do what they call a TPP. A TPP is a training plan proposal. This document is for the recognition for the state training authority that we have consulted with an RTO, whether that be TAFE or a private organisation, that we actually have we've actually made an arrangement for that RTO to take and agree to train that apprentice in the employment of that employer for the term of the training contract. That's why it's called a training plan proposal, that they agree that they will actually accept a student as an enrolment. It's not the enrolment in TAFE, but it's just an agreement that they will actually take that apprentice on. Within 12 weeks of signing that apprentice up or commencing of training, their RTO, the private RTO or the TAFE, must develop a full training plan and provide that full training plan both to the employer and to the apprentice. and that document has to be also lodged with the relevant training provider, so the relevant state training authority. Okay, that document outlines, obviously, once again, the course they're undertaking, but it must outline the modules, the units of competency they're going to be studying, and how the time frame will move forward through the apprenticeship and the formal training will actually take place. So that document has to be developed and should be provided to the employer and to the apprentice once at 12 weeks from the commencement date. Okay. Apply appropriate work, facility and equipment. So I won't go into that too much. I did cover that earlier, but it is responsibility of the employer that they're going to provide the relevant work-based facilities and the relevant workplace experience for that apprentice to gain that qualification. Okay, that goes without saying. That, you know, if we're doing a carpentry apprentice, obviously the apprentice must be actually working in that environment. They also have the range of basic training to develop those competencies. We need to make sure, and once again, it's being put back onto us again, that the apprentice has the opportunity to gain the competencies necessary in their workplace environment to move through their training. We do have some situations where some organisations don't always cover the full range of work experience necessary. So sometimes we have to interact with the apprentice and the employer to maybe look about subcontracting that apprentice out to another employer just to gain that qualification if possible, or that workplace experience if needed. And we're just mainly talking about that workplace experience more so than the actual competency from TAFE. Once again, I won't go into the qualifications of supervisors and so forth, but the last part is the employer really should have some sort of regular contact with your RTO. TAFE do have an obligation to make sure that they're in contact with their employer, whether that be issues within the training through the course of the apprenticeship, or whether or not the apprentice is actually failing to attend TAFE. The RTO has a responsibility to be making notification to that employer that the apprentice has failed to turn up to TAFE, or they're actually seeing some issues within the workplace. Okay. I think that pretty much covers the training contracts and so forth. The only thing I just do want to mention to you that post the 1st of February 2020, all AMP providers under this new contract have an obligation to do what we call a pre-sign-up contact with both the employer and the apprentice at least 24 hours before the sign-up takes place. Now, this is a new regulation put onto us from the federal government that if an apprenticeship was to be signed up on the Tuesday morning, we would have had to at least have made formal notification to that employer and to that apprentice and document that contact Monday morning before we can actually do a sign-up on the Tuesday. Where we see barriers for that happening is if we have employers ringing us up on the day and saying that my apprentice has to go to TAFE this afternoon to enrol, and they need a copy of a training plan, we are unfortunately not able to jump straight away and actually undertake that sign-up straight away. We have to unfortunately go through that 24-hour pre-sign-up contact before we actually take that sign-up on. And I just like to reimburse that, because we unfortunately that is a new requirement put onto us as of the 1st of February 2020. Okay, I just want to touch base. This is the next document we've actually got there, and this is a fairly important one that we really like to try to stress to the employers. Now, when we ever take on an apprentice or a trainee, our organisation and any other provider has an obligation to forward to that employer or apprentice what incentives or any entitlements that they may be entitled to for the course of their apprenticeship. I just want to go through our standard basic incentives for employers, and most of the trades that we're talking about today, being the carpentry, joinery and so forth, those trades are covered under the National Skills Shortage. So most employers, unless there's some major issue, would be entitled to our federal incentives. Just having a look at the first column, or the first page there, we look under the new entrant workers for Australian apprentices, and there's a lot there. Certificate 3, which is our trade-based one, we have a standard commencement of $1,500 at commencement, and that's paid to the employer after 6 months. So that apprentice has to be in the workplace for a 6-month period, and then we have a standard completion of 2,500 for a normal apprenticeship. So traditionally, for an upskilling of an apprentice at the moment is a $4,000 incentive. That's our base. That's our base employer incentive. If you're recommencing an apprentice, that means that apprentice that actually has been with the employer before, and that you do take that apprentice on, that you would be entitled to $750 for recommencing the apprentice, and if you complete the apprentice with you, once again, you'll be entitled to that $2,500. They're our standard incentives, and once again, at the time of sign up, we traditionally just notify you of those incentives that you are entitled to. Some additional incentives that have been obviously been flagged a little bit lately, and that's a very important one, especially for the building construction industry, is our what we call our SARS pay, which is our supporting adult apprenticeship additional incentive. Traditionally, that incentive was only payable for apprentices who commenced their apprenticeship at the age of 25 and above, but that has now been reduced as of July this year. That's been reduced down to the age of 21. So any employer that takes on an apprentice and they start their apprenticeship as 21 or over with that employer, the employer will track an additional $4,000 incentive at the 12-month period. So once again, if that apprentice that in place stays for that period of time and they're over the age of 21 at the start, they will attract an incentive of an additional $4,000. So that's a very good change for the federal government to do that. But it's still not a huge amount, but obviously it's definitely a benefit. Some of the incentives that are entitled to apprentices are main thing is living away from home allowance. So if your apprentice, say for argument's sake, come from Port Macquarie and they moved from Port Macquarie to Sydney or Sydney to Port Macquarie to take up an employment with that employer, our organisation, well, we'd be able to, through the federal government, we'd be able to assist them with some living away from home allowance. And that's covered for the first 3 years. It's $77 commenced. Then it goes down to, in the second year, it goes down to $38 and then down to $25 per week in the third year. And once again, that's listed on that document there as well. Can you just get the next page over if that's okay, thank you. Another incentive that's available for apprentices or trainees that are covered under the National Skills Shortage is an incentive called the Trade Support Loan. We get a lot of inquiries about this, about how it works, who's eligible and so forth. The Trade Support Loan is a loan provided to the apprentice, okay, as long as they are employed in a National Skills Shortage trade and that they are an Australian citizen, permanent resident to Australia. And that makes them eligible to be able to attract or apply for this particular loan, which is paid for over the period of the 4 years and can be paid up to a total amount of $21,000 or $21,078 over the course of the 4-year period of the apprenticeship. It is broken up into lots of over the 4 years. So in the first year of the apprenticeship, that they can attract 8,400 in the first year, 6,324 in the second year, 4,200 in the third, and then 2,100 in the fourth year. Now those payments are broken up into monthly, so we actually pay them in monthly installments. So if we divided the 8,400 into 12 months, we would then obviously have that payment. So it's about $670 per month in the first year, and the second year obviously divide that by 12 and so forth. As I mentioned, it is a loan. The apprentice has to set an application form in, and the apprentice has to agree to setting that loan up, and it is only available for them for that period of that 4-year period. If the apprentice successfully completes the apprenticeship and they actually get course complete and they can successfully complete their TAFE component as well as their 4 years, they are entitled to a 20% discount on any money they borrowed during the course of their apprenticeship. The trade support loan is payable back once the student hits a threshold for their earnings, okay, and it's payable back now at $48,000. So once that apprentice actually, sorry, $45,000. So once the apprentice actually starts having an earning of over $45,880, they will have to start reimbursing that money back to the federal government. It is a loan, okay? There is no interest rate paid on that loan, but the threshold is linked to CPI. Once again, we actually provide all the relevant information and assistance for the apprentice at the sign-up. If they wish to attend, if they wish to go with the loan and so forth, we provide them support, but the apprentice must seek legal advice or financial advice, and we ask them to do so. And we don't provide any advice on whether they should take the loan up or not. It's up to them if they wish to do so. Right, next page over, thanks, if you could please. I just included the current national skills list for all the apprentices at the moment. Okay, they are the current lists on the right-hand side of the trades that are under that national skills shortage, and they are the trades that are linked to able to apply for that national skill, the trade support loan. Okay, so if you have a look on that side, once again, if we're talking mainly about the carpenters or carpentry and joinery or the joinery trade, they are the loans that are actually attached to that particular qualifications. Just go to the next page over, thanks, Karen. All right, I've actually enclosed for you a step-by-step breakdown of all incentives that are entitled to either the apprentice and the employer. Okay, and also it also talks a little bit about payroll tax exemptions and so forth. I've actually covered all the standard incentives. You just go across onto the sixth column. It actually does talk about payroll tax exemptions. Now, in New South Wales currently, all apprentices and new entrant trainees are payroll tax rebated. So if your company is paying a payroll tax and you have a payroll tax liability, the apprentices' pay or wages or salaries can actually be redeemed and retracted back from the Department of Office of State Revenue through their website. Unfortunately, we do not administrate that incentive or that actual that additional money, and unfortunately, it gets retracted back from the Department of State Revenue, and their website is actually on that link there for you as well. There is no payroll tax exemptions for existing workers. Okay, so currently in New South Wales, any existing workers that undertake a traineeship do not attract a payroll tax rebate. If you have an apprentice that's been working for you for many years and then as a normal employee and then moves into an apprenticeship, they become a payroll tax exempt apprentice. So apprentices are payroll tax exempt, but existing worker trainees are not. On the next column over where it says workers' compensation exemptions. Sorry, let's go back, thanks. In New South Wales currently, there is a rebate or a discount to your premium when you take on an apprentice. The employer that takes on the apprentice still must hold a workers' compensation policy, but they actually register that apprentice with their insurer, and they receive a discount in regards to their premium for that apprentice for the period of that apprenticeship. If you need some more information about that, WorkCover have an information website there. I've attached a web link on our slideshow there, and that also then covers that there for you. The last thing is obviously
and I'll just jump in on that one.
Thanks.
So I'll just jump in on that about just so if your apprentice actually is injured on the job, the costs associated with that and the paperwork and the return to the work obligations are the same as other employees. So just so that you're aware of that.
Yep.
Sorry, Scott.
That's fine, no problems at all. But once again, the state government's not covering the workers' comp. You still need to hold a workers' compensation policy, but you notify your insurer that they are a registered apprentice, and during the course of their apprenticeship, there is a premium rebate for that apprentice. Okay, and that only applies to apprentices, not to trainees. The last one really for me is the travel concession and also for motor vehicle registration. Apprentices during the course of their apprenticeship can apply for a concession card in New South Wales. They apply for concession through Services New South Wales, and that allows them to receive that concession card, and they can then apply for a concession Opal card. Okay, in ACT, I don't think there's a discount. I'll go to that one in a moment, but in New South Wales, that exists at the moment. Also on apprenticeships, okay, there's a car registration rebate. for the first 2 years of an apprentice's of the apprenticeship, if the apprentice owns their own motor vehicle and registered in their name, the apprentice can actually apply for a $100 rebate from their motor vehicle registry. And once again, I've included the vehicle registration rebate form. It's a link that's attached on there, and the apprentice, and we also provide that to the apprentice that they actually are entitled to that they can actually apply for that discount. Okay. So they're the main incentives that we have. It's a very brief overview. There's a lot of complex parts to it, but once again, any of your apprenticeship providers should be able to provide you with any information in regards to that. There's plenty of literature, and we actually, when we do the sign up and we provide a sign up kit, all these incentives are covered in our sign up kits and so forth. Just go to the next page over things. And the last one is just, once again, that's the ACT. So let's go back to ACT.
Yeah.
Just following up, there is, once again, information in regards to the ACT. Unfortunately, there's no payroll tax exemptions, once again, for existing workers, but there is for for apprentices, new entrant trainees and apprentices, but there's no workers' compensation premium rebates in ACT, unfortunately. There is some concession cards, as you can see, the Edge concession card that's available in the ACT. And there's also a Bunnings Power Pass. That's a really good one to talk about too, that only apprentices in the traditional trades like carpenters and so forth are entitled to that Power Pass discount as well. Okay. All right. I think I have covered everything in regards to those sides. The last thing but not least is I'll just include this workshop slide here. If an employer hasn't taken on an apprentice before or would like some additional information about how to supervise your apprentice during the course of their apprenticeship, the New South Wales state government and also the ACT government run regular workshops on how to supervise your apprentices. So if you have employers out there that haven't taken an apprentice on and so forth, and they would like some additional support, the State Training Authority website, New South Wales, has regular workshops available in all areas, whether it be Goulburn, Coffs Harbour, and so forth. That employer can actually register for that workshop and attend that workshop to get additional information about how they should actually supervise that apprentice during the course of their apprenticeship. They're free. There's no cost to you at all through those workshops. Okay. Also, too, I just like to mention also too, the apprenticeship services that are provided to you through your AMP is also a free service. There is no cost to the employer or the apprentice for any services or information provided to employers or apprentices during the course of the apprenticeship. They're a total free service. Okay. All right, Carol, I think that covers everything for myself.
Scott.
Is that okay for you?
That's all right. Well, that is fantastic. Yeah, we're going to do another 15 minutes talk about Christmas and December and close downs. But for everyone listening, if you want to type in, if you've got any questions for Scott, he'll be here at the end of the webinar, and we can do a question and answer then. But also after the webinar, if you'd like to forward any questions to Kerry, and they will be forwarded to Scott as well if they are appropriate from his end. And of course, you can email me anytime with any questions. All right, so we want to get down to, as we're at the first week of December, we've got 3 weeks really till Christmas. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows what their obligations are at this time of year, and that this can be like a little checklist for you, and also talk to you about how to handle your risks to do with the Christmas party. All right, now, as you know, in the General On-Site Award, there's one industry close down per year is allowed. Most people take it over Christmas. Now, my legal team has told me that technically, if you're having an industry close down, you have to have given your staff at least 2 months notice. So hopefully you've done that. But let's just say that most people know what's going on there. So what I'm suggesting to you, to make sure everyone knows what's going on, not just your apprentices, but your other staff, but especially your apprentices, because they do forget, is you need to, in an email or an attachment that's sent to them as an email, make sure you confirm the exact close down date, the exact return date. Confirm the way that they can communicate with you, or that you're going to communicate with them regarding exactly what if you're not sure what your day one site in January or beyond that, if you don't know what the site address is yet, that you just confirm with them how you're going to let them know, but also confirm with them and have an agreement on if there's any emergencies or late stage logistics changes that happen after Christmas or before the return date. How would you prefer it be acceptable that you guys communicate? Make sure that you confirm all of your instructions. Make sure that your apprentices know exactly what's required of them. No grey areas, just really black and white, really very easy there. Now with payroll, you want to make sure that you've confirmed with everyone that if you're paying across your close down period, make sure that you've confirmed the exact pay dates per your usual paying means, and make sure that those payments go in, because there's nothing that drives people insane than being on holidays and their pay doesn't go in. Just remember that leave loading, which is 17.5% in New South Wales, is added to all annual leave payments. Now, if you're operating an RDO system, which some of you may be doing, their staff may choose to receive a payout of all of their RDOs or some of their RDOs at the end of the year. Just for your information, all of our internal HIA apprentices, we do run an RDO system. We like them to carry 1 or 2 into the new year, so they've got them at their disposal if there's emergencies or things happen in January, February. But other than that, if they request that they'd like their RDOs paid out at the end of the year, we do that for them. If you require any information, like if everyone's got a very unique business situation, you can contact HIA Workplace Advisor on 1300 650 620. All right, so let's go on to staff Christmas parties. All right. So work Christmas parties under the law. Look, it's fantastic as an employer to have an end of year celebration, especially and to congratulate your staff and give back a bit and do something social with your people, because everyone's hopefully been working very hard and well throughout the year. So that's all great, but you need to be able to make sure you're minimizing your risk, because Christmas parties or anything social like that is considered a work-related activity for the purposes of workplace laws and WHS laws. So my legal team have said, if you don't have current workplace policies, so e.g. discrimination, harassment, bullying, or drug and alcohol policies, all of those kind of things, if you don't have them, please contact one of our advisors and they can advise you specifically on what you need to make sure that you are covered going forward. So minimize your risk with the Christmas parties, in that you want to remind all your staff, and I would, and my legal team agrees with me, we do this internally in HIA, but also with all of our apprentices. You want to put it in an email and make sure you've got a trail that you can prove that you have made sure and that you've communicated this very clearly to your staff, that the usual standards of behaviour, so the standards of behaviour that you would expect on the workplace apply to all social work functions, regardless of where they are held. So that means all workplace policies, so discrimination, harassment, bullying, anything like that, obeying, you want to make sure that people understand that workplace health and safety laws are still in effect. So just because it's the end of the year and there might be a few beers happening, that all the rules do not cease to exist. So you want to make sure that everyone understands that these policies are still in, even though you're having a great time, that they have to make sure that they keep it to a little bit of a dull rule in that way. Just want to make sure that no one just takes license to go over the top. All right, so you want to say in this email, you want to say, look, this is what we're doing, whether you're going out for a cruise or you're just going to the local watering hole or you're going to a restaurant or whatever you happen to be doing. You want to make sure that you put it in the email that the beginning of the party or the social function and the end time, and make sure you stick to those times. You want to, if it is a licensed premises, you want to make sure that you have a beginning and an end time where you are, as an employer, are covering the drinks, or where the bar is attached to your party or your event. If you have any underage staff there, which you may have with apprentices, make sure that there's a legal venue where that you guys can be sitting somewhere where someone under 18 is allowed to be by law. But make sure that you do set a time for the bar to close. You want to ensure that you have non-alcoholic and light drinks available for your staff, and ensure that there is some kind of food component to your event, and that is that's within reason to counterbalance anything that's going on alcohol. Now we should be providing some kind of transport home or having a plan B for all of your staff. Now, whether that's being cab vouchers or there's a designated driver, or you're doing a hire bus. Now, everyone's got a very, very unique situation depending on locations and travel times and all of those, but it is under law your responsibility to make sure that you've given your staff, if alcohol is being served, that they've got some kind of way to get home that keeps them safe. You want to make sure that that your employees are aware, and that's why I say do it in writing, that your responsibility as an employer ends as soon as the function ends. So that's why the stating the end time of the party and sticking to that is very important. And that if they continue on, they say, look, we don't need the plan B, we're going to continue on and go to another restaurant or go to another venue on their own back, then that's fine, but that is at their own risk, and you need to actually state that in full. There is an information sheet that I will be forwarding to Kerry that she can forward to you all when she's talking to you about, when she's following up with this webinar, so that, and that is from our legal team that covers all of these things. So you just want to make sure that there's common sense involved, but that we want to make sure as a HIA members that you are aware that you are responsible. It is a work function, even though it is a social event. And if there's any questions on that, please feel free, because I know that you're probably in planning mode for those things now, and very happy to help you on that. It is one of those issues wherever I've worked in apprentices and trainees, it's always been an issue every year. There are some fairly major lawsuits that have happened under WHS laws where employers and their staff have been held responsible for injuries during a Christmas party or a staff event. WHS laws are in effect, even though it is a social event. Okay, so what I might do is, so just recap what we've done here. So we've talked to Scott about the apprenticeship support services, you know, who they are in New South Wales and ACT. Serena Russo, who is happens to be the one that HIA uses for our internal apprentices, and we do a lot of joint events with them. What are their role, what are the services they provide, and Scott's been really has placed all that out before you, and how they interact with group training organisations, whether that is HIA apprentices or other group trainers. They provide the same services to them that they do to direct employers. We've gone through the incentives, the trade support loans, and also talking about some tips for December as far as close downs and the Christmas party. So I will, in 1 second, I will hand over to Kerry to see if there's any questions that we want to get to, but I want to alert you to our next webinar will be on Wednesday, 4th of March in next year, 2020, and we'll be talking about now that Scott's talked to you all about all the different incentives and things of going direct, we want to talk about, you know, which way, what are all your options with an apprenticeship? Do you go direct or do you use a group training organisation? How does that all work? If you're going to look at a group training organisation, how do you judge who is a good price and who's good value and all of those? So we'll take you through all of that in detail. Now, I'll be joined with one of our long-term, somebody who's on our committee for the Southern District and Wollongong, John Gill from J2 Building. He has been a long-time apprentice employer. He has done a lot of direct employment, but is also a group training client as well, with HIA, and has got experience from both sides, and it's really interesting to see his experience from both sides. But we want to talk about, you know, the real staffing costs, facts, figures, your risk management, workforce flexibility, your mentoring and business support in all of these circumstances, so that you have all the information you can to make business decision for yourself there. I will flag that we will have another, the final one of this series will be in May, and we will be talking about all the different things recapping all what we've done, but also talking about management and other things to do with apprentices going forward, but I'll alert you to that. So Kerry, are you there, darling?
I'm here. I'm always here, just in the background.
You're always there. Yes,
I'm
I
here.
know.
And we do
So
have
do we
lots of
have any
questions. We do, we
Okay,
do.
hit me. Hit us.
Yeah, okay. For you and Scott, so we've had some members who have been very patiently listening to everything you've said
Thank
and
you,
had a few
members.
questions. Shane asked, you did mention some of the incentives that an apprentice can get. So as if we take an apprentice through HIA, does the employer get the government incentives or does HIA get it?
Okay, so there's a mixed bag on that one, in that the basic incentives, which is the general incentive that Scott referred to as the 1,500 and the 2.5 at completion, that is actually HIA as the employer receives those. But any additional ones, so as far as adult or the new or the living away from home or the regional and rural or the new additional identified skills shortages, anything else that's coming down the pike from the government, HIA will put in the paperwork and pass through to the host employer. And if you'd like that in more detail, Kerry will give you my email and I'm happy to put that in writing for you.
Okay, great. Now, Sue has asked, does the 20% discount get applied to their TSL debt?
Yes, it does. Okay,
The training support, yes, it does.
Yeah, so
Go ahead, Scott.
To receive the 20% discount on that loan that they have, so they borrow the full amount and they successfully finish their apprenticeship, and that means that they've got to finish their TAFE component and the term with their employer. And we need to notify State Training Authority that the completion has taken place. They normally issue a certificate of proficiency. When we have that, we upload that. Our organisation uploads that into the federal database, and that is recorded against their debt. So if the person borrowed the $20,000, say for 20, that make it easy for calculation, they would only have to pay back 16. Okay, but we need to be sure that the apprentice has successfully finished both parts of the formal training component and their term with their employer, and that discount then is applied to the debt of the TSL. Correct. And that is then formulated through their income tax, just like a HECS debt. If a person had a HECS debt and they're starting to earn over that threshold of $45,888, they would then start being garnished through their income tax to reclaim that debt back for the federal government. I hope that answers the question, Sue.
Yeah, Sue, let us know if that helps out.
I wanted to jump in on the trade support loan as well, is just for employers to that Serena Russo, as Scott has said, their organisation and similar do all the paperwork. The payment of the trade support loans do not go through your payroll. They are direct from the government, direct to the apprentice's bank account. So just so you know that that's not something that's going to go through your payroll system as a complication.
Yeah, but it's a loan set up between.
Next one, Kerry.
Sorry.
Yeah, the government and the apprentice. Yes.
Yep. So could you confirm, Kimberly's asked, could you confirm that the 17.5% LL is only on staff being paid award, not staff being paid above award?
Oh, okay. I know that what I will do is I will make a note of that, and I will when I finish this, I'll walk out and talk to my legal team and confirm.
Okay, we can get in contact with Kimberly direct.
Yep.
Okay.
Above award, because that's a good question, because I'm not sure if the 17.5 is only on the award portion of their wage or it's on all of it. So that's a great question. So I will get back to you, Kerry, on that so that we can forward that to Kimberly.
Okay, Lane has asked, what if the apprentice has not accumulated enough leave to cover the shutdown period?
Okay, so under the award, those days are considered leave without pay officially. If you have it is then up to you as an employer whether you want to pay those annual leave days forward. if you get my drift. But that is not an obligation of yours.
So you could choose
this
to
particular
prepay
leave,
them.
yes, but that's a risk you take as an employer for any staff of prepaying. But if you feel that you've got a relationship that warrants that, and that's something that you choose to do, then you can do that legally. But make sure you've got that, you've got it signed off. That your apprentice is signing off that they are getting prepaid, so that they and how much that actually amounts to, how many hours that amounts to. And remember, if there's anything to do with pay or conditions, or if your apprentice is under 18, make sure that anything you put in writing is CC'd to the parents, and that they are actually, they sign off on it. You want to get either an email of their confirmation, or them actually putting their signature on the piece of paper that outlines the arrangement you're coming to.
Okay, and John is also interested in knowing some of these other answers. So what we might do is I might put together a list of the questions, and we might put some answers together and perhaps send them through to everyone who's been on the line, because there's probably some documents there that we could attach as well that you had in the presentation today. That
That's correct.
Would be handy.
Now, so everyone who's there, if you'd like the presentation, obviously it'll be available on the website when Kerry puts it up under the webinar, as our other webinars are. But if you'd like it emailed to you, there's nothing that is there's no commercial in confidence information on these slides. So very happy to forward them to you with any other supporting documentation that's been requested.
Okay, thank you. And another question I had was I think Scott mentioned you mentioned the rego rebate of $100 for apprentices.
Correct.
Does that have to be on a vehicle that they use for work?
No, it could be any vehicle that they use. It does, as long as it's registered in their name. It cannot be registered in a parent or guardian's name. Now, we obviously speak to the apprentice because sometimes if the vehicle is registered under the parent's or guardian's name, there's obviously a massive discount in regards to the insurance. But if the apprentice has to be registered the vehicle and it's registered in their name, if they're not driving it to a program, it doesn't matter. It's just an incentive the state government give the apprentice for the first 2 years of their apprenticeship.
So it's the first 2 years of their apprenticeship, or they can claim it for 2 years?
It's the first 2 years. So they have to be a first-year apprentice and a second-year apprentice, and they're entitled to claim it for the first 2 years of their apprenticeship, first and second year.
And you also mentioned a Bunnings Power Pass. Was that just for ACT?
No, it's not. Actually, Bunnings, this is a really good one as well, but that's both. Bunnings actually have a really good scheme, and we put that on the document there, that they actually have a very good a power pass for apprentices. The apprentice can actually register with Bunnings. They'll provide them with a plastic discount card, and anytime they're buying material or they're buying tools and so forth, it does give them really good trade discounts on all their purchases, and it's a lot better than the 5%. They do offer very good discounts, and that's advertised very heavily in the HIA booklets, and it's actually on their website. So it's a good discount to have. It's in both states.
Okay, great. We are coming to the end of our questions, so if you do have another question, quickly type it in. I realise we're just past 2 o'clock, so I know people will be jumping off shortly, but if you have a question, send it through now. John asked, who pays for TAFE?
Okay, good question.
So at the moment, I'm not. Yeah, let me know if is ACT paid for now, or is it just New South Wales, Scott?
Okay, so currently under the New South Wales current legislation is that all TAFE is free for both apprentices and trainees. TAFE training is free for apprentices and trainees. Now, that is open at the moment. There's no end date on that at the moment, but please be aware that some TAFEs are charging an administration fee for materials. So we have heard of a couple of TAFEs saying, look, we want to charge $300 for purchase of some wood and so forth, which is an administration fee. It's not covered by us, but it is a fee that's been slapped. But all TAFE fees, so the $2,000 that normally is being charged to an apprentice in New South Wales is covered by the state government. So there is no cost to the apprentice or the employer for attending TAFE and their normal TAFE studies.
If your TAFE does have the materials cost or administration fee, which it changes from campus to campus, that is still covered under the award that is employer ultimately responsible. The way we suggest that you handle that is to actually have your apprentice pay for what those things, and if at the end of each semester, whatever that extra payment is, if they've been attending and everything's going okay, you can then rebate that cost to them. That is the way HIA Apprentices does it. Don't recommend that you prepay TAFE fees for your apprentices. Just a quick word to the wise.
Yeah, admin fees, not TAFE fees, but admin fees. Yes.
Oh, sorry, admin fees. So the way what the state government is actually paying the full tuition fees. So if you're talking to your TAFE, yeah, so make a separation in your mind between the tuition fees and the materials / administration costs, and that's how they word it now.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
So, yep. And Sue, I guess on that point, Sue asked, should the employer pay for TAFE workbooks, etc.?
Well, that's part of the materials cost usually. Under the award, the employer is ultimately responsible, but it allows you under the award to do that as a rebate, not as an upfront. And that is what we suggest that you do, unless it's extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, if they're under the building construction award, the word stipulates that the employer is liable for all costs of training,
yes.
and the apprentice must be reimbursed within 6 months of the burden of cost, as long as the apprentice is showing relevant and reasonable progression through the TAFE. That's the wording.
Yeah, and that's how HIA does it internally with ours, and how I recommend everyone with direct apprentices or trainees does that as well. The only thing I wanted to add on when we're talking, Scott was talking about incentives, is in my recent talks around the regions, there's been a lot of talk about the adult apprentices thing. Scott touched on the employer incentive for adult apprentices. Be aware that there's also an adult subsidisation for the adult apprentice. If you want to just briefly talk to that, Scott, just so that, and if anyone needs more information on this, it's something that I've noticed is not widely known. So if you need more information, again, let us know and we'll get all of the relevant information to you. But there is still a rebate to a top-up payment to the apprentices, Scott.
Sorry, I was on mute. No, currently the only incentive is to the employer at the moment.
Okay, all right, sorry. Yep. Yeah, okay, no, right. That's good. All right, thanks. Kerry, is there anything else that you want us to talk about now, or?
Yeah, got a couple more. So in relation to the additional identified skills shortage payments for employers of potential $4,000 over the apprenticeship, how is the employer eligible?
Okay, great question.
I'll give this one to you, Scott.
Okay. In regards to the national skills shortage, with that particular one, look, I would say 99% of employers are eligible, as long as the apprentice is an Australian citizen, New Zealand passport holder that's been in Australia for 6 months, and they don't hold a qualification that's directly related to what they're training in now. The employer would be eligible for it under the national skills shortage. With the national skills shortage, it disregards all previous qualifications when we're doing an assessment. So if the person is a rocket scientist and they decides to become a carpenter apprentice, those prior qualifications don't get assessed when we're doing an assessment for the employer employing that apprentice under the national skills shortage. If it's not under the national skills shortage, we then have to go in and have a look at those previous qualifications and see if those qualifications will knock the funding out. But under a traditional trade apprenticeship, which we're mainly talking about today, and that the apprenticeship we're looking at is on the skills shortage list, the national skills shortage disregards all prior qualifications. So in most cases, the apprentices that we're talking about here today or the employer will be entitled to that $4,000. I hope that answers the question properly. If it's not exactly, they're more than happy to give me a call.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Also, just a quick one on that. We actually do the assessments, and we actually then send out also to the necessary claim forms to the employer directly at the point when those claims are eligible and due.
Yeah, and as I said before, if you are utilising HIA, anything in those categories would be paid through, if you are eligible, will be paid through to you as the host employer.
Okay, great. Well, now we've got a few questions just around a little bit more detail around payments and things. So we might take those offline and just get those answered directly, just because I know that sometimes it's a topic that you might need to jump across and talk to our workplace advisors with. But just in regards
make
to
sure
the
I'm not
Christmas
saying anything
party,
incorrect.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. With the Christmas party, if the Christmas party is a work-related activity, does the staff get paid at the usual hourly rate for attending the party during a work day? Good question.
Now, that's a really good question, and I have to say, around the traps, that is something that is discussed and argued all the time. It is actually, it's a really great question because it's not even on this one-page information sheet. So I will again double check that with Andrew, our workplace guy out the front, just to double check, because I'm sure it's a completely easy answer on his behalf. So I will get that through to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I guess if it's during the workday that they would normally be working, they would assume they would get paid if they have to attend. I don't know, but
the assumption is everywhere I've ever worked has been that. I would have to just double check to make sure exactly what the legal terminology is before I give advice on that. But I would be leaning towards paid.
But we will double check that. And also you mentioned, Carolyn, that we do already have an info sheet covering some of those points that you made about what our members should cover off. I think it's a really, I didn't even realize we had that. And I think actually, I was just thinking at this time of year, all our members probably need to have a look at that just to make sure they're covered themselves. So I
will forward that to you so you can attach it to the emails following up with everyone. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'd be interested to know how many people are throwing a Christmas party with their staff this year. I know HIA have our own staff Christmas parties, and our one up here in Coffs Harbour, we actually just do a breakfast and then we have to get back to work. But down in Sydney, they do a lunch. But
Richard's a slave driver.
yeah. No, that's all. It's all good. We're such a small group here that we probably don't need to, be sitting around having another party.
The reason I bring it up is it comes up a lot when you're actually in the field talking to people in about real life situations. It comes up a lot, and I just know in my own working life the difference between what the Christmas parties used to be 5 to 10 years ago, and I can't believe what we used to get away with, and what the way that employers need to handle that now is vastly different. And so I will forward you this information sheet, and it also has the workplace services 1300 number on it. Please, if you're a member, do not hesitate to, if you're concerned about anything, please call them. They will if they can't pick it up straight away, they'll get back to you probably within an hour and talk to you about any subject. It's better to know than not know. And they're really, really great. I can hear them in the office talking to people all day, every day. It's very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And look, as a member, that is part of your member benefits. So definitely, even if you think, there's no silly question, and you're better off making sure that you're all covered rather than something happening. And as you said, Carolyn, we talked, didn't we, about what we used to, the parties that we used to have back in the day, and you just can't do it these days, and it's better just to be
safe. It's
and
amazing that some of those employers are really, really lucky that nothing happened.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and
the other thing I'd say is that go ahead. That I mentioned in my talk is that with the work, if you don't have generalised workplace policies of conduct, drugs and alcohol, phones, discrimination, equal opportunity, bullying, or sexual harassment, if you don't just have a document on your that is distributed to your staff and you are a member, please take action with the workplace advisors to get one done for you. It does not have to be a big, thick document. It can be very, very short, but you need to have one. You need to have one to cover yourself. It's like having a proper WHS policy. So I just recommend that you follow that up.
Yeah,
Sorry, Kerry.
Sue's just mentioned that, you know, she said not sure about the Christmas party. There's only 4 of us, her husband, her and her son, who's the apprentice, and another apprentice, so not sure that they'd want to hang out with us. I think it'd be a pretty quiet Christmas party for you, Sue, but still.
But just so you know, even though there might be a small team, and even though they may be family members, if it's actually billed as if you're going to the local club, so just say you've got a knock-off day, which is your last day, you work till lunch, and then you're going to the local club for lunch or a few drinks in the afternoon for Christmas. Just be aware that that could be viewed by government, by legal people as a workplace function. After that, once that's finished and everyone goes on their own way, whether to your house or to elsewhere, then that's just normal social interaction. But even if you do anything just like that as a group, cover yourself.
Even with a family member.
Even with a family member, but especially as if you've got another apprentice as well, just err on the side of, you know, if it's an official lunch that we're all going, you know, we're going to go out all together, then that has something to do, that is like that is connected to the work day, if you get my drift. Even if it's a small group like that, just cover yourself. All you have to do is have one email, and since you know how they're getting home, then your plan B will be pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that helps you, Sue. And I think that is the last question we had. But as Carolyn said, if you do think of a question later, you can either email myself or speak to Workplace Advisors or Carolyn. And you know, there's often after a webinar you think of something that you thought, oh, I should have asked that, but you didn't get enough time to type something in. So don't worry, just give us a call or email us. That's what we're here for. I will be adding this recording to the website in the next few days, and our next webinar, actually this is my last webinar for the year, so I'm going to be in planning phase now for next year. Yeah, I've done a lot of webinars this year, and this is the second one with the Apprentice team. We're going to do another 2, as Carolyn mentioned, next year. So look, it's a really good opportunity for you to ask any questions, anything you've been thinking about. Tap the brain of our presenters, because they've got, you know, I guess between them probably 30 or 40 years of experience. So I'd like to thank you, Carolyn, for joining us and presenting, and Scott as well for joining us from Canberra. Thank you.
And
to thank you very much, Scott. Have a
all
great
of
day.
Our members. Is there anything you want to add, Carolyn, before I close the webinar?
No. So I'll send some basic documentation on to Kerry to include in her follow-up email, but also my contact details and the Workplace Advisors and Scott's general inquiry number as well. And what will happen with Serena Russo, correct me, is they'll go through the general number. Depending on what region you're in, the local consultant will then get in contact with you with detailed information.
Yeah, if there's any questions today, they're more than welcome. You can hear my mobile out. They can call me if they have any questions about today. They can call me directly if they need to.
Fantastic.
Oh, that's great, Scott. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and look forward to more webinars next year. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a great Christmas, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.